Imagine this, you're 6 months pregnant, glowing with excitement for your family's future, when you overhear a phone call that shatters everything. Your husband, a millionaire real estate tycoon, is cheating with your best friend, and they're plotting to strip you of your home, your savings, even your children, humiliated, broke, and alone. Sarah Wellington faces the ultimate betrayal. But what if I told you she doesn't just survive? She rises like a phoenix, turning her pain into power, rebuilding her life, and delivering the sweetest revenge by buying his entire company. Buckle up for twists, heartbreak, and triumph in this epic empowerment saga. You won't see the final plot twist coming. If this story fires you up, smash that like button, drop a comment below with your favorite revenge moment, share it with a friend who needs inspiration, and subscribe for more jaw-dropping tales of comebacks and karma. Let's dive in. Sarah Wellington placed her hand on her rounded belly as she sat in the sterile waiting room of Seattle Women's Health Center. 6 months pregnant and glowing with anticipation, she checked her phone for the third time. Richard was 20 minutes late for their ultrasound appointment. Again. Mrs. Wellington. The technician's voice broke through her growing anxiety. "We can start without your husband if you'd like." Sarah forced a smile. "Let's give him 5 more minutes. He's probably just stuck in traffic." But as she waited, scrolling through pregnancy apps and baby name lists, a familiar voice drifted from the hallway. Amanda Chen, her closest friend and former wedding planner, was on the phone just outside the waiting room. "No, darling, I can't meet tonight." Amanda's voice carried a tone Sarah had never heard before. Sultry, intimate. "Richard and I need to be careful. The stress is already affecting my cycle, and after our Aspen weekend, we both agreed to take things slower." Sarah's blood turned to ice. Richard and Amanda Aspen weekend. Her hands trembled as she strained to hear more. I know," Amanda continued. "But his pregnant wife is getting suspicious. We need to be smarter about this. The last thing we need is for Sarah to figure out what's really going on before we're ready." The phone slid from Sarah's numb fingers, clattering to the floor. Several other expectant mothers looked over with concern, but Sarah couldn't process their worried expressions. Her world had just shattered with a few overheard words. "Mrs. Wellington." The technician appeared again. "Your husband just texted. He's running late from a business meeting. Should we proceed?" Sarah nodded mechanically, following the woman into the dimly lit ultrasound room. As the cool gel spread across her belly and the monitor flickered to life, she saw her baby boy for the first time. Healthy, perfect, growing strong despite the chaos erupting in her life. But instead of joy, Sarah felt only numbness. How long had this been going on? How could Amanda, who had planned her wedding 15 years ago, who had been present for Emma's birth, who had helped Sarah through her mother's cancer scare, how could she betray her like this? The drive home passed in a blur. When Richard finally arrived at the house, still in his expensive suit and smelling of cologne that seemed too strong, Sarah studied his face with new eyes. Had he always been this good at lying? "Sorry I missed the appointment, honey," he said, kissing her forehead absently. "How's our little guy doing?" "He's perfect," Sarah replied, her voice steadier than she felt. "Doctor says everything looks normal." That evening, as Richard claimed to be reviewing contracts in his home office, Sarah found herself in the nursery they'd been preparing together. The walls were painted a soft blue, decorated with sports themes Richard had insisted on. She stood before the mirror they'd hung to help with late-night feedings, studying her reflection. When had she become this woman? When had she transformed from Sarah Martinez, the ambitious marketing executive who had built million-dollar campaigns, into Sarah Wellington, the devoted homemaker who scheduled her life around her husband's needs? 15 years. 15 years since she'd walked away from her corner office in her dreams to support Richard's growing real estate empire. 15 years of believing that love meant sacrifice, that being a good wife meant putting her ambitions aside, Like Elizabeth Gilbert in Eat, Pray, Love, Sarah realized she had lost herself somewhere along the way. But unlike Gilbert's journey of self-discovery, Sarah's revelation came not from wanderlust but from devastating betrayal. Later that night, while Richard slept soundly beside her, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that her entire life had been built on lies. She slipped out of bed and crept to Richard's office, her heart pounding. His briefcase sat on the desk, slightly open. Inside, beneath the contracts and business proposals, she found it, a small, elegant thank you card in Amanda's distinctive handwriting. Thank you for the most romantic weekend ever. I can't wait for our future together. All my love. A. The date stamp showed it was from last month, right around the time Richard had claimed to be at a real estate conference in Denver. Sarah's knees gave out, and she sank into Richard's leather chair, the card trembling in her hands. This wasn't just an affair. This was a relationship. Amanda was planning a future with Richard while pretending to be Sarah's best friend. As she sat there in the darkness, her unborn son moving restlessly in her belly, as if sensing her distress, Sarah wondered how many other lies her marriage had been built on. And more importantly, she wondered if she had the strength to uncover the truth. The next morning, Sarah went through her usual routine like an actress playing a role. She made Richard's coffee exactly how he liked it, kissed him goodbye at the door, and waited for Emma's school bus with a smile that felt like it might crack her face. But inside, she was planning. Amanda had suggested they meet for their usual Wednesday coffee at Pike Place Market. This time, Sarah would be ready. The cafe buzzed with the typical Seattle energy. Tourists snapping photos, locals hurrying to work with steaming cups, street musicians adding soundtrack to the morning chaos. Sarah arrived early, choosing a table by the window where the natural light would make it impossible for Amanda to hide behind her usual perfectly applied makeup. Amanda swept in 10 minutes late, as always, looking effortlessly stunning in a designer coat that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary. Her long black hair was styled in loose waves, and her makeup was flawless except for a tiny mark on her neck that she'd tried to cover with concealer. "Sarah, darling," Amanda air-kissed both her cheeks, the same greeting she'd been giving for years. "You look absolutely radiant. Pregnancy suits you so well." The casual cruelty of it, complimenting Sarah's pregnancy while carrying on an affair with her husband, made Sarah's stomach turn, but she kept her expression neutral. "Thank you," Sarah said simply. "You look lovely too. That's a beautiful necklace." Amanda's hand flew instinctively to the delicate gold chain at her throat. Sarah recognized it immediately. She'd helped Richard pick it out last Christmas, thinking it was for her. Instead, he'd given her a practical watch. "Oh, this old thing?" Amanda laughed, but her eyes were wary. "Just something I picked up during a weekend trip." "Aspen?" Sarah asked quietly. The color drained from Amanda's face, but she recovered quickly. Too quickly. "I'm not sure what you mean," Amanda said, reaching for her latte with hands that weren't quite steady. Sarah leaned forward, placing her own hands flat on the table. "I heard you on the phone yesterday. Amanda, at the doctor's office. You were talking about Aspen, about Richard, about me being suspicious." For a long moment, the two women stared at each other. Around them, the cafe continued its bustling rhythm, but their corner had become an island of tense silence. Then Amanda smiled, not the warm, friendly smile Sarah had known for years, but something cold and calculating. "Well," Amanda said, sitting back in her chair, "I suppose it's time we had an honest conversation." Sarah felt her coffee cup slip from her numb fingers. It shattered against the floor in what seemed like slow motion, hot liquid splashing across the cafe tiles as other customers turned to stare. "You want honesty?" Amanda continued, ignoring the mess. "Fine. Yes, Richard and I have been seeing each other for 8 months now. And before you start playing the victim, you should know that he came to me." Rain began to streak the window behind Amanda, matching the tears Sarah fought to hold back. "We connected over business first," Amanda went on, her voice taking on the tone of someone explaining something obvious to a slow child. I was planning that charity gala for his company, and we discovered we had so much in common. Ambition, drive, a vision for the future. A vision that included destroying my marriage. Sarah's voice came out as barely a whisper. Amanda shrugged. Your marriage was already dying. Sarah, you've been playing house for 15 years while Richard built an empire. Do you think a man like that wants to come home to someone whose biggest accomplishment is organizing the PTA bake sale? Each word hit Sarah like a physical blow. She thought of all the school events she'd attended alone because Richard was too busy. All the business dinners where she'd played the perfect supportive wife. All the dreams she'd set aside. You were always too naive. Sarah, Amanda continued, her voice growing more vicious. Richard deserves someone who understands his ambitions, someone who can match his success, someone who didn't give up at the first sign of responsibility. Sarah stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. We've been friends for 15 years. Amanda, I trusted you with everything. And that was your first mistake, Amanda replied coolly. Successful people don't trust blindly. They verify, they protect themselves. You've been so busy playing the perfect wife and mother that you forgot the world doesn't owe you anything. Sarah turned to leave, but Amanda's next words stopped her cold. He was going to tell you after the baby was born, Amanda called out. We decided it would be easier that way. Less stress on the pregnancy. The fake concern in her voice was the final straw. Sarah spun around, her hands clenched into fists. How considerate of you both, she said, her voice shaking with rage. Planning my life behind my back, making decisions about my future while I'm carrying his child. Amanda tilted her head, studying Sarah with something that might have been pity. The child will be fine. Richard's a good father to Emma. He'll take care of both kids. The implication was clear. Richard would take care of the children, but not Sarah. She was expendable, replaceable, already replaced. Sarah walked away without another word, leaving Amanda sitting alone at the table with the shattered coffee cup at her feet. Outside, the Seattle rain had intensified, matching the storm building in Sarah's chest. She drove aimlessly through the city streets, past the Space Needle and the waterfront, through neighborhoods where she and Richard had once talked about buying vacation homes. Everything looked different now, tainted by the knowledge that her entire life had been a lie. When she finally returned home, she found Emma in the kitchen doing homework, her teenage daughter's presence an anchor in the chaos. Mom, are you okay? Emma looked up from her algebra with concern. Your eyes are all red. Sarah forced another smile. Just allergies, sweetie. The rain always gets to me. But as she helped Emma with her math problems, listening to her daughter chatter about school drama and weekend plans, Sarah made a decision. Whatever happened next, she would protect Emma. Her daughter would not grow up thinking that love meant accepting betrayal, that being a woman meant sacrificing everything for someone who saw you as disposable. That evening, when Richard came home late again, cologne masking the scent of Amanda's perfume, Sarah was waiting for him in the living room. We need to talk, she said simply. Richard's face went through a series of micro-expressions. Guilt, calculation, then practiced concern. Of course, honey. Is everything okay? You look upset. Sarah almost laughed at his performance. I know about Amanda. The mask slipped for just a moment, and Sarah saw something that looked almost like relief cross his features. Sarah, I can explain, he began, moving toward her with his hands raised as if approaching a wild animal. It wasn't supposed to happen. Amanda came on to me during a vulnerable moment. I was stressed about the Peterson deal, and you were so focused on the pregnancy. Stop. Sarah held up her hand. Just stop lying. I'm not lying, Richard insisted, his voice taking on the reasonable tone he used in business negotiations. Look, it was a mistake, a terrible mistake, but it's over now. I'll end things with Amanda, and we can work on our marriage. Maybe some counseling would help. For a moment, Sarah almost believed him. This was the man she'd fallen in love with, the one who could make her feel like the most important person in the world when he turned his full attention to her. This was the father of her children, her partner for 15 years. But then she remembered Amanda's cruel smile, the thank you card hidden in his briefcase, the casual way they'd planned her future without her input. "Is it over?" she asked quietly. "Yes," Richard said immediately. "Completely over. I promise you, Sarah, it meant nothing." That night, Sarah lay awake beside her husband, listening to him sleep peacefully while she stared at the ceiling. Maybe he was telling the truth. Maybe it really was over. But the next morning, while taking out the trash, she found something that shattered that fragile hope. Hidden in Amanda's designer purse, which she'd left in their mudroom after their disastrous coffee meeting, was a pregnancy test. Positive. The pregnancy test felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds in Sarah's trembling hands. She stared at the two pink lines, her mind struggling to process what this meant. Amanda was pregnant. The timeline meant it could only be Richard's. Sarah's own baby chose that moment to kick hard against her ribs, as if sensing the catastrophe unfolding around him. She pressed her free hand to her belly, whispering reassurances she didn't feel. "It's going to be okay, little one. Mama's going to figure this out." But even as she said the words, Sarah knew nothing would ever be okay again. Her marriage wasn't just damaged, it was over. Richard hadn't been having a casual affair. He'd been building a new life with Amanda while keeping Sarah in the dark. The sound of Richard's car pulling into the driveway sent Sarah into a panic. She quickly hid the pregnancy test in her purse and tried to compose herself. But her hands were shaking too badly to be convincing. "Morning, beautiful," Richard called out as he entered the kitchen, already dressed in one of his expensive suits. "I have to fly to Portland today for the Morrison acquisition. I'll be back late tonight." Sarah watched him pour coffee into his travel mug, kiss her forehead absently, and grab his briefcase. Such a normal morning routine. Except now she knew he was lying about Portland, just like he'd lied about everything else. After he left, Sarah found herself drawn to his home office like a moth to flame. The room that had always been off limits to her suddenly felt like the key to understanding how thoroughly she'd been deceived. Richard's computer was password protected, but Sarah remembered him using Emma's birthday, followed by their anniversary year. The screen unlocked on her second try, revealing a desktop organized with military precision. What she found in his financial folders made her blood run cold. Offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands, property transfers to shell companies, investment portfolios she'd never heard of. Richard hadn't just been hiding an affair. He'd been systematically moving their assets out of her reach. Sarah printed everything, her hands shaking as page after page revealed the scope of his deception. Their joint savings account, which she'd thought contained their emergency fund, had been emptied 3 months ago. The college fund they'd been building for Emma had been transferred to an account in Richard's name only. Even the house she'd thought was theirs, had been quietly transferred to a company called Wellington Holdings, LLC. A company she'd never heard of, but that appeared to be solely owned by Richard. By the time she'd printed the last document, Sarah felt physically ill. She rushed to the bathroom, barely making it before morning sickness combined with shock overwhelmed her system. This wasn't just adultery. This was financial abuse on a massive scale. Richard had been planning this betrayal for months, maybe longer, ensuring that when he finally left her, she'd have nothing. The doorbell rang just as Sarah finished cleaning herself up. Through the peephole, she saw a man in an expensive suit holding an envelope. "Mrs. Sarah Wellington?" he asked when she opened the door. "Yes, you've been served." Sarah's hands went numb as she accepted the papers. Even before opening them, she knew what they contained. Divorce papers. Richard was already 3 steps ahead of her. As usual, the documents were brutal in their efficiency. Richard was seeking full custody of both children, claiming Sarah's emotional instability and financial irresponsibility made her an unfit mother. He was also claiming that Sarah had no right to any business assets, as they'd been acquired through his sole efforts and expertise. Most devastatingly, he was demanding that she vacate the family home within 30 days. As it was solely owned by Wellington Holdings, LLC, and never the marital residence as defined by law, Sarah sank onto the couch. The papers scattered around her like autumn leaves. 15 years of marriage, and she was being discarded like an unwanted business asset. The sound of Emma's key in the front door made Sarah quickly gather the papers and stuff them into a drawer. Her daughter couldn't see this. Not yet. "Mom," Emma called out, dropping her backpack by the door. "Why are you home? Don't you have that dentist appointment?" Sarah had completely forgotten about her appointment. "I rescheduled," she lied. "How was school?" Emma studied her mother's face with the sharp perception of a teenager. "You look weird. Are you okay?" "Just tired, sweetheart. The baby kept me up last night." That evening, Sarah attempted to maintain normalcy for Emma's sake, but everything felt surreal. She helped with homework, prepared dinner, and listened to Emma's stories about drama club tryouts, all while her world crumbled around her. When Richard returned home at nearly midnight, he found Sarah waiting in the living room, the divorce papers spread across the coffee table. "I see you got my lawyer's correspondence," he said calmly, loosening his tie as if they were discussing the weather. "Your lawyer," Sarah's voice was barely a whisper. "Richard, we've been married for 15 years. We have a daughter. I'm carrying your son. And I want what's best for all of us," Richard replied, sitting across from her like they were in a business meeting. "This divorce will be clean and efficient. You'll have visitation rights with the children, of course, in a reasonable alimony arrangement." "Reasonable," Sarah gestured to the papers. "You're claiming I have no rights to any of our assets? You've hidden money in offshore accounts? You've transferred our house to a shell company?" Richard's expression didn't change. "Those assets were acquired through my business acumen. You've been a housewife for 15 years. Sarah, you haven't contributed financially to our success." The casual cruelty of his words hit her like a physical blow. "I gave up my career for you, for our family. I supported every business decision you made. And I'm grateful for that support," Richard said. "But support isn't the same as contribution. My lawyers have advised me that maintaining our lifestyle would be best achieved through a clean separation of assets." Sarah felt something break inside her chest. This wasn't the man she'd married, the one who had promised to love and cherish her. This was a stranger wearing Richard's face, speaking to her like she was an inconvenient business problem to be solved. "What about Amanda's pregnancy?" she asked quietly. Richard's composure slipped for just a moment. "How did you—" He caught himself and straightened his shoulders. "Amanda's situation doesn't concern you." "Doesn't concern me?" Sarah stood up, her hands clenched into fists. "Your mistress is pregnant with your child, and it doesn't concern me." "Keep your voice down," Richard hissed, glancing toward the stairs where Emma was presumably sleeping. "Yes, Amanda is pregnant. Yes, it's mine. That's exactly why we need to handle this divorce quickly and quietly." The casual way he admitted it, like he was confirming a dinner reservation, made Sarah's knees buckle. She sank back onto the couch, her hands instinctively protecting her belly. "How long?" she whispered. "How long what? How long have you been planning this? The offshore accounts, the property transfers, the shell companies. This isn't something you did overnight." Richard was quiet for a long moment, and when he finally spoke, his voice was almost gentle. "About a year. A year. While she'd been excitedly planning for their second child, Richard had been systematically dismantling their life together. While she'd been supporting his business decisions and managing their household, he'd been building escape routes that left her with nothing." "Why?" The word came out broken, barely audible. "Because I fell in love with someone else," Richard said simply. "Someone who shares my ambitions, who understands the demands of success, someone who won't hold me back." Sarah looked at the man she devoted half her life to and realized she was looking at a stranger. The Richard she'd loved had either never existed or had died so gradually she hadn't noticed. "I want you out of the house by the end of the month," Richard continued, his business voice returning. My lawyers will be in touch about the details. As he walked upstairs to what had been their bedroom, Sarah remained on the couch, surrounded by legal documents that reduced 15 years of marriage to cold legal language. Outside, Seattle's rain drummed against the windows, and Sarah realized she was truly alone for the first time in her adult life. But in that darkness, something else began to grow. Not just despair, but anger. Richard thought he could discard her like an outdated business plan. He thought 15 years of her life meant nothing. He was about to learn how wrong he was. The first photo appeared on Instagram at 7:43 a.m. on a Tuesday morning. Sarah only discovered it because Emma came downstairs for breakfast, with tears streaming down her face and her phone clutched in her shaking hands. "Mom," Emma whispered, unable to meet Sarah's eyes. "You need to see this." The image showed Richard and Amanda on a yacht. Amanda's barely there bikini showcasing her still flat stomach, while Richard's hands rested possessively on her waist. The caption read, "When you upgrade from desperate housewife to successful businesswoman, some women are just born winners." But that was only the beginning. Within hours, Sarah's social media feeds were flooded with images she never knew existed. Richard and Amanda at exclusive restaurants Sarah couldn't afford. Amanda wearing jewelry Sarah recognized from Richard's business expense receipts. The two of them at what appeared to be a real estate conference. Amanda's hand prominently displaying an engagement ring. The photos weren't random. They were curated, professional quality, designed for maximum impact. Someone had been documenting Richard and Amanda's relationship for months, building a portfolio of evidence for this exact moment. Mrs. Wellington. The voice belonged to Carrie Morrison, another mother from Emma's school. "I'm so sorry to bother you, but I wanted you to hear this from a friend first." Sarah's stomach dropped. "Hear what?" "The pictures, they're everywhere. Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. Someone even made a TikTok compilation set to music. Emma's classmates are talking about it." Sarah closed her eyes, imagining her 14-year-old daughter walking through school hallways while her peers whispered about her father's public affair. The cruelty was breathtaking, but the social media humiliation was just the opening act. That afternoon, while Sarah was at the grocery store trying to maintain some semblance of normal life, her credit card was declined, then her debit card, standing in the checkout line with a cart full of groceries and no way to pay. Sarah felt every eye in the store on her. "I'm sorry," the cashier said quietly. "Would you like to call your bank?" Sarah's hands shook as she dialed the customer service number, already knowing what she would hear. "Mrs. Wellington, your accounts have been frozen pending resolution of legal proceedings," the banker explained. "Your husband's attorney filed an injunction this morning, citing concerns about asset protection during divorce proceedings." Asset protection. Richard had frozen their joint accounts, leaving her without access to money she'd helped earn through 15 years of unpaid labor, managing their household and supporting his career. "What about the emergency account?" Sarah asked desperately. "That account was closed last week by the primary account holder." Sarah abandoned her cart and walked out of the store, the whispers of other shoppers following her like a physical weight. In the parking lot, she sat in her car and called Maya Rodriguez, the divorce attorney whose number she'd found online the night before. "Sarah, I've been expecting your call," Maya said without preamble. "I've seen the social media posts. This is a coordinated attack designed to pressure you into accepting an unfavorable settlement. Can they do that? Freeze all our money?" "Unfortunately, yes, if they can demonstrate concern about asset dissipation. But don't worry, we're going to fight this." That evening brought the cruelest blow yet. Emma burst through the front door, her face red and blotchy from crying. "Some kids at school showed me the TikTok," she sobbed. "It has 3 million views. Mom, 3 million people laughing at our family." Sarah pulled her daughter into her arms, feeling Emma's shoulders shake with humiliation and rage. "It's set to some stupid song about gold diggers," Emma continued. "The comments are all about how Dad traded up for a younger model. They're calling you old and desperate and—" "Stop," Sarah said firmly. "Those people don't know us. They don't know our story." But even as she comforted Emma, Sarah's own phone buzzed with notifications. Anonymous messages were flooding her social media accounts, some expressing sympathy, but most echoing the cruel narrative Amanda had crafted. Maybe you should have taken better care of your husband. This is what happens when women let themselves go. She's lucky he stayed as long as he did. Each message felt like a physical blow, but the worst part was the tiny voice in Sarah's head that wondered if they were right. Had she become too comfortable, too focused on being a mother and wife at the expense of being a desirable partner? The stress reached its breaking point 3 days later. Sarah woke up feeling cramped and uncomfortable, but attributed it to pregnancy, insomnia, and emotional strain. It wasn't until she felt wetness between her legs and saw the bright red blood that panic set in. "Emma," she called out, trying to keep her voice calm. "I need you to drive me to the hospital." Emma appeared in the doorway, took one look at her mother's pale face and the blood seeping through her pajamas, and immediately grabbed her keys. "Should I call Dad?" Emma asked as they rushed to the car. Sarah almost laughed at the absurdity of it. "Your father is in Monaco with Amanda. Check his Instagram." The emergency room at Swedish Medical Center was a blur of worried faces and medical equipment. As nurses attached fetal monitors and doctors asked questions about stress levels and recent trauma, Sarah realized she was completely alone. No husband holding her hand, no family members in the waiting room, just her terrified teenage daughter trying to be strong. "Mrs. Wellington," Dr. How Patricia Chen, no relation to Amanda, thankfully spoke gently as she reviewed the test results. "You're experiencing stress-induced bleeding. The baby appears to be fine for now, but I'm concerned about your blood pressure and emotional state." "Is my baby going to be okay?" Sarah whispered. "For now, yes, but continued stress at this level could trigger premature labor. You need to minimize emotional trauma and get adequate rest." As if on cue, Sarah's phone buzzed with another anonymous message. "Karma is a bitch. Hope you lose everything." Dr. Chen noticed Sarah's expression as she read the message. "Mrs. Wellington, are you being harassed online?" "It's complicated," Sarah said, not wanting to explain the whole sordid story. "Social media abuse can have serious physical consequences, especially during pregnancy." Dr. Chen continued, "I'm going to prescribe bed rest for the next week and recommend you consider counseling to help process whatever you're going through." As Emma drove them home in the rain, Sarah stared out the window at the Seattle skyline and made a decision. Richard and Amanda wanted to play dirty. They thought they could destroy her reputation, isolate her from support, and force her to accept scraps from the life she'd helped build. They had no idea what they'd unleashed. That night, while Emma slept and the baby kicked restlessly in her belly, Sarah sat at her laptop and began to research. Not just divorce law or financial recovery, but something deeper. She researched Amanda Chen's background, Richard's business partners, the legal precedents for her situation. What she found was illuminating. Amanda had a pattern. This wasn't her first affair with a married business partner. She'd been involved in at least 2 other similar situations, both ending with the wives getting nothing while Amanda walked away with substantial financial gains. More importantly, Sarah discovered that several of Richard's recent business deals had irregularities that might interest the state attorney general's office. Deals that Amanda had been intimately involved in planning. Richard had made one crucial mistake in his systematic betrayal. He'd underestimated the woman he'd married. The Sarah who'd given up her marketing career 15 years ago had been brilliant at research, strategy, and building compelling narratives. That woman was still there, buried under years of domestic routine and self-doubt, but she was waking up, and she was angry. By dawn, Sarah had filled 3 notebooks with information and created a digital folder that would have impressed any private investigator. She also had a phone number for Richard's biggest business rival, a man named Marcus Chen again, no relation to Amanda, who had been trying to acquire Richard's company for years. If Richard wanted to wage war, Sarah would give him one, but it would be fought on her terms, with weapons he'd never see coming. The phone rang at exactly 9 a.m. Sarah let it go to voicemail, knowing without checking that it was Richard's attorney calling to pressure her into a quick settlement. Instead, she called Maya Rodriguez back. Maya, it's Sarah Wellington. I've changed my mind about strategy. We're not just going to fight this divorce, we're going to win it. And I'm going to need your help exposing some very interesting business practices in the process. I like the sound of that, Maya replied. What do you have in mind? Revenge, Sarah said simply, but the legal kind. Maya Rodriguez's law office occupied the 14th floor of a downtown Seattle high-rise, its floor-to-ceiling windows offering a commanding view of Elliott Bay. Sarah had chosen Maya not just for her reputation as a fierce divorce attorney, but because Maya understood what it meant to rebuild from nothing. Tell me everything, Maya said, gesturing for Sarah to sit in one of the leather chairs facing her desk. And I mean everything. Affairs, financial discrepancies, business dealings, even things that seem unrelated. Sarah spent the next 2 hours laying out the evidence she'd gathered, watching Maya's expression grow more grim with each revelation. This is worse than I initially thought, Maya said, reviewing the financial documents. Richard hasn't just been preparing for divorce. He's been committing financial fraud. Moving marital assets to offshore accounts without disclosure is illegal, even if you're married to the asset holder. But can we prove it? With these documents, absolutely. But Sarah, there's something else you need to know. Maya leaned forward, her expression serious. I made some calls after our last conversation. Amanda Chen isn't who she claims to be. Sarah felt her blood pressure spike. What do you mean? Her real name is Amanda Zhang. She's been married 3 times, each time to wealthy businessmen. Each marriage ended in divorce after she had affairs with their business partners. And each time, she walked away with substantial settlements while the wives got nothing. The room seemed to spin around Sarah. She's done this before. According to my sources, yes. She targets successful men through their wives' social circles, gains their trust, then systematically destroys the marriages while positioning herself as the victim. She's been running this con for at least 10 years. Sarah thought about all the times Amanda had encouraged her to trust Richard completely, to step back from his business affairs, to focus solely on being a supportive wife and mother. Every piece of advice had been designed to make Sarah more vulnerable. There's more, Maya continued. Richard's business partner, Michael Torres, called me this morning. He wants to meet with you. Why would he want to meet with me? Because he thinks Amanda has been embezzling from their company. He has evidence, but he needs someone with legal standing to help him pursue it. 2 hours later, Sarah found herself in a coffee shop in Pioneer Square, sitting across from Michael Torres. Richard's business partner was younger than she'd expected, maybe 35, with kind eyes and calloused hands that spoke of his construction background. I should have called you months ago, Michael said without preamble, but I kept hoping I was wrong about what was happening. What exactly is happening? Michael pulled out a tablet and showed Sarah a series of financial spreadsheets. Amanda has been skimming money from our client accounts. Small amounts at first, then larger ones. She's also been sharing confidential information about our deals with competitors. Sarah studied the numbers, her old marketing analytical skills kicking in. These discrepancies, they go back almost a year, exactly when she started working with us, Michael confirmed. Sarah, I think your husband is involved. Some of these transfers required his approval codes. The betrayal cut even deeper than Sarah had imagined. Richard wasn't just having an affair. He was actively participating in stealing from his own company. Why are you telling me this? Sarah asked. Because I think you're the only one who can stop them, Michael replied. As Richard's wife, you have legal standing to request an audit of the company finances. I've already talked to our other partners, and they're willing to support you. Sarah's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Stop digging, or you'll regret it. Michael noticed her expression. What is it? Sarah showed him the message. I've been getting these for days. That's Amanda's style, Michael said grimly. She threatened my ex-girlfriend when she started asking questions about why Amanda knew so much about my personal life. Your ex-girlfriend? Lisa? She's a forensic accountant. Amanda somehow found out Lisa was looking into our company's books and made her life hell until she backed off. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. What kind of threats? Social media harassment, anonymous calls to her employer claiming she was unstable, even false reports to child services about her parenting. Michael's expression was grim. Amanda knows how to destroy people. Sarah, that's her real skill. But even as fear crept through Sarah's system, she felt something else: determination. Amanda had made one crucial mistake. She'd underestimated Sarah's intelligence and overestimated her willingness to be a victim. Michael, I need you to put me in touch with Lisa, Sarah said. If Amanda is embezzling money, there will be digital trails, and if Richard is involved, there will be evidence of his participation. Are you sure you want to go down this road? These people are dangerous. Sarah thought about Emma crying over the viral TikTok, about her own humiliation in the grocery store, about sitting alone in the emergency room while Richard vacationed with his pregnant mistress. They made it dangerous when they decided to destroy my life, she replied. That evening, Sarah met Lisa Park at a small Vietnamese restaurant in the International District. Lisa was exactly what Sarah had expected from a forensic accountant: sharp-eyed, meticulously organized, and carrying a briefcase that probably contained enough evidence to topple governments. Michael filled me in on your situation, Lisa said over phone. I have to warn you, what I've found about Amanda Zhang is disturbing. Tell me. Lisa opened her briefcase and pulled out a thick folder. Amanda Zhang, formerly Amanda Chang, formerly Amanda Liu. 3 previous identities, 3 destroyed marriages, approximately $12 million in settlement money collected over the past decade. Sarah's hands trembled as she reviewed the documentation. Photos of Amanda with different hair colors and styles, marriage certificates, divorce decrees, and most damning of all, a pattern of financial irregularities at every company she'd worked for. She's a professional marriage wrecker, Sarah whispered. More than that, Lisa replied. She's a white-collar criminal who's been using romantic relationships to gain access to financial information. The FBI has been tracking her for 2 years, but she's always managed to disappear before they could build a solid case. Until now, Lisa confirmed. Because this time, she got greedy. The amount she's stolen from Richard's company is substantial enough to warrant federal charges, and unlike her previous victims, you have the financial sophistication to help us trace her methods. Sarah felt a strange calm descend over her. For weeks, she'd felt like she was drowning, overwhelmed by betrayal and legal complications she didn't understand. But this, research, analysis, building a case, this was familiar territory. What do you need from me? She asked. Access to Richard's home computer and financial records, Lisa replied. As his wife, you have legal rights to community property, including digital assets. If we can prove he knew about Amanda's embezzlement, he becomes an accessory to federal crimes. And if he's just another victim, Lisa's expression softened slightly, then he's still guilty of adultery, financial abuse, and fraud in his divorce proceedings. But at least you'll have leverage to protect yourself and your children. Sarah's phone buzzed again. This time it was a photo message, a picture of Emma leaving school, with the caption, "Pretty daughter. Would hate for anything to happen to her." Sarah's blood ran cold. They're threatening my daughter. Lisa took one look at the message and immediately called someone on her phone. This is Lisa Park. I need a protective detail on a family member. Someone just escalated to threatening a minor. As Lisa spoke in low, urgent tones to what Sarah assumed was federal law enforcement, Sarah made a decision that would change everything. Amanda and Richard wanted to play dirty. They wanted to threaten her daughter. They had just declared war on the wrong woman. Lisa, Sarah said when the call ended, I'm in. Whatever you need, however dangerous it gets, I'm in. But I have one condition. What's that? When this is over, I don't just want justice. I want them to lose everything, the same way they tried to destroy me. I want Richard's company, Amanda's freedom, and proof that will ensure they never hurt another family. Lisa smiled for the first time since they'd met. Sarah, I think you and I are going to get along just fine. Outside the restaurant, Seattle's rain had turned to sleet, coating the streets in a thin layer of ice. But as Sarah walked to her car, she felt warmer than she had in months. The game had changed, and Sarah Wellington was ready to play. Dr. Elena Vasquez's office felt like a sanctuary after weeks of legal meetings and financial investigations. The soft lighting, comfortable chairs, and walls lined with books created an atmosphere of safety that Sarah desperately needed. Tell me about the woman you were before you got married, Dr. Vasquez said gently during their first session. Sarah found herself thinking about that question for days afterward. Who had she been at 23? Fresh out of business school with a marketing degree and dreams of changing the world, I was fearless. Sarah finally answered in their second session. I created campaigns that increased client revenues by 300%. I won awards. I had corner office plans and a 5-year strategy for my own agency. What happened to that woman? I fell in love, Sarah said simply. And somewhere along the way, I convinced myself that love meant sacrificing everything else. Dr. Vasquez leaned forward. Sarah, what if I told you that real love doesn't require you to disappear? The sessions became a lifeline as Sarah navigated the increasingly complex legal battle. Richard's lawyers were fighting dirty, claiming that Sarah's mental instability during pregnancy made her an unfit mother. They'd subpoenaed her medical records from the emergency room visit, twisting her stress-induced bleeding into evidence of psychological breakdown. They're going to argue that your emotional state puts both children at risk, Maya explained during a strategy meeting. Richard is demanding full custody with supervised visitation only. On what grounds? Sarah demanded. The social media harassment, the emergency room visit, and witness testimony about your erratic behavior during the separation. Witness testimony from whom? Maya's expression was grim. Amanda, she's claiming you've been stalking her and making threatening phone calls. Sarah felt the familiar rage building in her chest. But Dr. Vasquez's voice echoed in her mind. Anger is information. What is it telling you? She's trying to control the narrative, Sarah said, her voice steady despite the storm inside her. Everything she's done has been about making herself the victim and me the villain. Exactly, Maya agreed. But we have evidence that's going to turn that narrative on its head. The evidence came from an unexpected source. Private investigator Jake Morrison had been following Amanda for 2 weeks when he captured something extraordinary, a recording of Amanda bragging to a friend about her latest mark and how easy it had been to destroy another desperate housewife. The recording is clear, Jake explained, playing the audio for Sarah and Maya. She admits to deliberately targeting Richard through your friendship, stealing money from the company, and planning to disappear once the divorce settlement came through. Amanda's voice on the recording was casual, almost bored, as she described manipulating Sarah's emotions and Richard's ego. These millionaire wives are all the same, she laughed, so desperate to believe their husbands love them that they'll ignore obvious red flags until it's too late. But the most damning part came near the end. The pregnant thing is perfect timing. Richard's convinced he's leaving Sarah for our great love story, but once I get what I need from the divorce settlement, I'm gone. The baby isn't even his. It's from the guy I was seeing before Richard. Sarah felt the room spin around her. The baby isn't Richard's. According to the recording, no, Jake replied. She's been playing both men, using the pregnancy to pressure Richard into leaving you while maintaining a relationship with the actual father. Maya was already on her phone, calling the FBI contact Lisa had connected them with. We need to move fast. If Amanda realizes we have this recording, she'll disappear like she has before. But their legal victories were overshadowed by a devastating blow that came the next morning. Sarah woke up to find Emma sitting on her bed, tears streaming down her face, holding an official-looking letter. Mom, I got kicked out of school, Emma sobbed. Sarah's blood turned to ice. What and why? They said you haven't paid tuition for 2 months, and someone called the school claiming you've been drinking during pregnancy and neglecting me. The cruelty was breathtaking. Richard had stopped paying Emma's private school tuition without telling Sarah, then allowed Amanda to call the school with lies designed to humiliate Emma among her peers. "Sweetheart, none of that is true," Sarah said, pulling Emma into her arms. "And we're going to fix this." But fixing it meant confronting the reality of her financial situation. With their joint accounts frozen and Richard controlling all their assets, Sarah was essentially broke. The modest savings account she'd maintained separately had barely enough to cover a month's expenses. That afternoon, Sarah did something she hadn't done in 15 years. She applied for a job. The marketing firm was smaller than where she'd worked before her marriage, but the energy was familiar. Creative professionals collaborating on campaigns, the buzz of deadlines and client presentations, the satisfaction of solving complex problems through strategic thinking. "Your portfolio is impressive," said the hiring manager, reviewing work samples from 15 years ago. "But there's a significant gap in your employment history." "I took time off to raise my family," Sarah replied, having practiced this conversation with Dr. Vasquez. "But I've been staying current with industry trends, and I think my life experience gives me insights into consumer psychology that I didn't have 15 years ago." "What can you start immediately?" "Tomorrow," Sarah said without hesitation. Walking out of that building with a job offer in hand, Sarah felt something she hadn't experienced in years: pride in her own capabilities. She wasn't just Richard Wellington's wife or Emma's mother. She was Sarah Martinez Wellington, marketing professional and problem solver. That evening, she called Maya with news that would change everything. "I remember something," Sarah said. 15 years ago, just before I got pregnant with Emma, I had an idea for a digital platform that would connect legal professionals with clients using social media algorithms." "Okay." Maya sounded puzzled about the relevance. "I wrote a complete business plan. I even filed preliminary patents. Then I got pregnant, and Richard convinced me to focus on family instead of business." "Sarah, where are you going with this?" "Those patents are still valid, and with social media explosion over the past 15 years, the idea is worth millions now. It's community property, which means Richard owes me half of any value it generates." Maya was quiet for a long moment. "Sarah, you might have just found the key to everything." But their breakthrough was interrupted by the sound of Emma screaming from the kitchen. Sarah rushed downstairs to find her daughter staring at her laptop screen in horror. "Mom," Emma whispered, "you need to see this." On the screen was a new social media post from Amanda's account, a photo of Sarah leaving the marketing firm that afternoon, with the caption, "When gold diggers get desperate, they'll take any job. Some women just can't accept when they've been replaced by someone better." But what made Sarah's blood run cold wasn't the post itself. It was the implication. Amanda had been following her, watching her every move, building a case for Richard's custody battle by documenting her desperate job search. Sarah stared at the screen, feeling Amanda's presence like a physical threat. But instead of the fear and despair she'd felt before, she felt something else: calculation. "Emma, pack a bag," she said calmly. "We're going to stay at Maya's house for a few days." "Are we running away?" Emma asked. "No, sweetheart," Sarah replied, her voice carrying a new strength that surprised even her. "We're regrouping, and then we're going to finish this." As they packed, Sarah's phone rang. The caller ID showed Richard's number, the first time he'd called her directly since serving the divorce papers. "Sarah, we need to talk." Richard's voice was tight with stress. "Amanda's missing. She's disappeared with all the company's liquid assets, and the FBI is asking questions about you." Sarah almost laughed at the irony. After weeks of being painted as the unstable, vindictive wife, she was suddenly being positioned as Richard's potential ally against their common enemy. "Richard," she said calmly, "I think it's time you learned what your business partner has really been doing, and what I've been building while you thought I was just another desperate housewife." The war was far from over. But for the first time since this nightmare began, Sarah Wellington was fighting from a position of strength. Living in Maya's guest room with a pregnant belly and a traumatized teenager wasn't the rock bottom Sarah had imagined for herself, but it was close. Maya's small Capitol Hill townhouse was comfortable, but sharing space with another family highlighted just how dramatically Sarah's circumstances had changed. "I can take the couch," Emma offered the first night, noticing her mother's discomfort trying to find a sleeping position that worked with her expanding belly. "Absolutely not," Sarah replied. "We're guests here, and we're grateful for Maya's generosity." But gratitude didn't pay bills or replace the security Sarah had taken for granted for 15 years. The job at Morrison Marketing paid a fraction of what Richard spent on Amanda's jewelry, and with legal fees mounting daily, Sarah found herself making calculations she'd never imagined. Formula for the baby would cost approximately $80 per month. Emma needed new clothes since she'd hit a growth spurt during the trauma. Gas, groceries, phone bills, expenses that had been invisible when Richard managed their finances, became overwhelming obstacles. Sarah's first day at Morrison Marketing was humbling in ways she hadn't anticipated. The office technology had evolved dramatically since she'd last worked, and her colleagues were young enough to be her children. But muscle memory kicked in during her first client presentation, and Sarah remembered why she'd loved this work. The problem with most legal marketing is that it treats potential clients like cases instead of people, Sarah explained to the team. Women going through divorce don't want to see ads promising to destroy their husbands. They want to see evidence that someone understands their fear and can guide them through the process with dignity. Her campaign concept for a family law firm focused on empowerment rather than vengeance, featuring real women who had rebuilt their lives after difficult divorces. The client loved it, and Sarah's supervisor began giving her more complex accounts. But the real breakthrough came during a late evening when Sarah was working at Maya's kitchen table, combining her new marketing work with research for her own legal case. Emma was doing homework beside her, and Maya was reviewing case files. "You know what's missing from divorce law," Sarah said, looking up from her laptop. "Comprehensive support. Lawyers handle the legal aspects, but women need marketing help to rebuild their professional identities, financial planning to manage their new circumstances, and connections to other professionals who understand their situation." Maya glanced over from her files. "What are you thinking?" "I'm thinking about that digital platform I patented 15 years ago," Sarah replied. "What if we adapted it specifically for women facing major life transitions? Divorce, widowhood, career changes after raising children. They all need similar support networks." Emma looked up from her algebra. "Mom, that's actually a great idea. My friend Jessica's mom went through a terrible divorce last year, and she had to figure out everything by herself. She kept saying she wished there was some kind of guide." Sarah's mind was racing now, the way it used to when she was building campaigns that would revolutionize client businesses. "Maya, how many women contact your firm who can't afford your services?" "Hundreds," Maya replied immediately. "I wish I could help them all, but I can't work for free. So, what if there was a platform that connected them with sliding scale attorneys, financial planners who specialized in post-divorce planning, marketing professionals who could help them rebuild their careers, therapists who understood their specific trauma, all in one place?" Maya set down her files and gave Sarah her full attention. "You're talking about building a comprehensive support ecosystem." "Exactly. And we could monetize it through subscription fees from the professionals, advertising from relevant service providers, and premium features for clients who wanted additional support." The idea consumed Sarah's thoughts over the following weeks. During lunch breaks at Morrison Marketing, she sketched out user interface designs. In the evenings at Maya's house, she researched the legal and technical requirements for building such a platform. Late at night, while Emma slept and her baby kicked restlessly, she wrote business plans and financial projections. The work reminded her of who she'd been before marriage, before she'd convinced herself that supporting Richard's dreams was more important than pursuing her own. Dr. Vasquez had been right. Real love didn't require her to disappear. "I want to invest," Maya announced one morning over coffee, "in your platform idea. I think it could revolutionize how we support women through major life transitions." "Maya, you're already doing so much by letting us stay here." "This isn't charity, Sarah. This is business. I've seen your projections, and I think you're underestimating the market demand." Women in crisis need exactly what you're proposing, and there's nothing like it currently available. The timing was crucial for another reason. Richard's company was hemorrhaging money after Amanda's disappearance. Michael Torres called daily with updates on the FBI investigation, and it became clear that Amanda had been stealing for months before vanishing. The company's going to fold within 60 days if we can't recover the stolen funds. Michael explained during a meeting at Maya's office. Richard is trying to keep it quiet, but our biggest clients are already asking questions. What does that mean for the divorce proceedings? Sarah asked. Maya's expression was grim. If Richard's company goes bankrupt, there might not be any assets to divide. On the other hand, if we can prove his involvement in Amanda's embezzlement, you might have grounds to claim the entire company as compensation for fraud. But Sarah's thoughts were elsewhere. Michael, what if instead of trying to save Richard's company, we offered to buy it? The room went silent. Buy it? Michael looked confused. Sarah, with what money? Sarah pulled out her laptop and opened her business plan. With this, Maya's willing to invest, and I think we can find other backing if we present this properly. Richard's company has excellent client relationships and a solid reputation. Before Amanda corrupted it, those assets, combined with my platform concept, could create something revolutionary. The audacity of the idea was breathtaking. Sarah Wellington, the discarded wife who had been painted as a desperate housewife, was proposing to acquire her cheating husband's company and transform it into something bigger than he'd ever imagined. You're talking about revenge, Maya said slowly. I'm talking about justice, Sarah replied. Richard destroyed my life because he thought I was worthless without him. I'm going to prove him wrong. The first investor meeting was scheduled for the following week. Sarah spent every free moment preparing, remembering skills she'd forgotten she possessed. The presentation she created was masterful, combining emotional appeal with hard financial data, demonstrating both the market need and the profit potential. But the night before the meeting, Sarah's carefully constructed confidence cracked. Standing in Maya's bathroom at 2 a.m., staring at her reflection in the mirror, she saw a woman 8 months pregnant, homeless, and financially dependent on others' charity. What if I'm deluding myself? She whispered to her reflection. What if I'm just another desperate housewife trying to prove she matters? Her baby kicked hard against her ribs, as if disagreeing with her doubts. Your mom used to be someone before she forgot, Sarah said to her belly. And she's going to be someone again. The investor meeting went better than Sarah had dared hope. 3 venture capital firms expressed interest, and by the end of the week, she had preliminary funding commitments for $2 million, enough to acquire Richard's failing company and launch her platform. But the call that changed everything came from an unexpected source. Sarah, this is Agent Jennifer Walsh with the FBI. The voice on the phone was professional but kind. We need to meet. We have information about Amanda Zhang that affects your legal case, and we need your help with our investigation. As Sarah agreed to the meeting, she realized her transformation was complete. She was no longer the victim of Richard and Amanda's schemes. She was becoming their worst nightmare, a woman with nothing left to lose and everything to gain. Agent Jennifer Walsh looked exactly like Sarah had imagined an FBI investigator would. Sharp suit, sharper eyes, and a briefcase that probably contained enough evidence to topple small governments. They met at a downtown Seattle cafe, chosen for its ambient noise that would mask their conversation. Amanda Zhang is gone, Agent Walsh said without preamble. She disappeared 3 days ago with approximately $2 million in stolen funds and a fake passport. But before she vanished, she made some very interesting recordings. Sarah felt her stomach clench. What kind of recordings? Agent Walsh pulled out a small digital recorder. Conversations with your husband about framing you for embezzlement and ensuring you'd be left with nothing in the divorce. She was apparently planning to use these as insurance if Richard ever tried to betray her. The agent pressed play, and Richard's voice filled the space between them, clear and unmistakable. Sarah's too trusting to see it coming. Once we transfer the money through her old company accounts, it'll look like she's been embezzling for months. with her emotional state and pregnancy hormones, no jury will believe she's competent enough to manage assets. Sarah's hands shook as she listened to the man she'd loved for 15 years, casually discussing destroying her life. There's more, Agent Walsh continued. Amanda recorded Richard discussing his plans to claim you're an unfit mother due to financial crimes. The custody battle was designed to be the final blow, losing your children after losing everything else. Why are you telling me this? Sarah whispered. Because we need your help to catch them. Amanda's gone, but Richard is still here, and he's about to escalate his attacks on you. We want to use you as bait. The plan Agent Walsh outlined was both terrifying and brilliant. Sarah would approach Richard pretending to want reconciliation, wearing a wire to record his admissions about the embezzlement scheme. In exchange, the FBI would provide evidence clearing her of any financial wrongdoing and supporting her divorce case. It's dangerous, Agent Walsh warned. Men like Richard become unpredictable when they're cornered. And if he realizes you're working with us, he already tried to destroy me, Sarah replied. This is my chance to fight back. Satikirium. 3 days later, Sarah sat across from Richard in his downtown office, the same space where she'd once brought him homemade lunches during their engagement. The wire taped to her chest felt obvious, but Richard seemed too distracted by his company's financial crisis to notice her nervousness. I made a mistake, Richard, Sarah said, following the script Agent Walsh had helped her develop. I should have been more supportive of your relationship with Amanda. Maybe we could work something out. Shared custody, a quiet divorce, no lawyers. Richard's eyes sharpened with interest. What exactly are you proposing? I dropped the fraud allegations, accept a minimal settlement, and we co-parent peacefully. In exchange, you help me disappear quietly. Maybe a fresh start somewhere, far from Seattle. You'd do that, just walk away. Sarah forced herself to look vulnerable, the way she'd felt for months before anger replaced despair. I'm 8 months pregnant. Richard, I'm tired of fighting. I just want what's best for the children. What Richard said next would haunt Sarah forever, but it also sealed his fate. The embezzlement evidence against you is airtight. Sarah, even if you tried to fight it, no jury would believe a desperate housewife over a successful businessman. The smart thing is to take the deal I'm offering and disappear before things get worse for you. He continued, describing in detail how he and Amanda had planned to frame Sarah, how they'd manipulated her emotions to keep her distracted, and how satisfying it would be to finally be free of dead weight that had been holding back his success. When Sarah left the office an hour later, she had enough recorded evidence to destroy Richard completely, but instead of satisfaction, she felt only sadness for the 15 years she'd wasted loving a man who saw her as disposable. The FBI moved quickly. Within 48 hours, Richard was arrested for embezzlement, conspiracy, and fraud. The news coverage was extensive, with local media portraying him as a white-collar criminal who had stolen from his own company while betraying his pregnant wife. But Sarah barely noticed the media circus. She was in labor. David Martinez Wellington entered the world at 3:47 a.m. on a Tuesday morning, weighing 7 pounds and screaming with the outrage of someone who had arrived in the middle of a family crisis. Maya held Sarah's hand through the delivery while Emma paced the waiting room, still processing her father's arrest. He's perfect, Sarah whispered, holding her son for the first time. And he's going to grow up knowing that his mother is strong enough to protect him. The custody battle evaporated when Richard's criminal charges made his fitness as a parent questionable. Emma chose to live with Sarah, saying she was proud to have a mom who fights back instead of just accepting whatever terrible men do to her. With Richard's legal troubles mounting and his company's reputation destroyed, Sarah's acquisition offer was accepted without negotiation. Wellington Holdings became Phoenix Rising Legal Marketing, with Sarah as CEO and Maya as Chief Legal Officer. The platform launch exceeded every projection Sarah had made. Within 6 months, Phoenix Rising had connected over 10,000 women with legal, financial, and career support services. Sarah's story, the discarded wife who built an empire from the ashes of her marriage, became a powerful marketing tool and inspiration for other women facing similar betrayals. "We're getting interview requests from CNN, NBC, and The Today Show," Emma announced, now working part-time for the company while finishing high school. "And someone wants to turn your story into a Netflix series." Sarah looked around her corner office, the space that had once belonged to Richard, holding 6-month-old David while reviewing expansion plans for Phoenix Rising. The irony wasn't lost on her that she now occupied the office where Richard had once planned her destruction. "Schedule the interviews," Sarah decided. "If my story can help other women realize they're stronger than they think, then it's worth sharing." The TED Talk came 9 months after David's birth. Standing on the red circle stage, Sarah looked out at an audience of 3,000 people and began, "15 months ago, I was a pregnant housewife whose biggest decision was what to cook for dinner. Today, I'm the CEO of a company that's helped 25,000 women rebuild their lives after devastating betrayals. I'm here to tell you that rock bottom can be the foundation for your greatest success." The standing ovation lasted for 5 minutes, but the moment that mattered most came later that evening, when Emma found Sarah in the nursery, watching David sleep. "Mom," Emma said quietly, "I'm proud of you. Not just for building the company, but for showing me what it looks like when a woman refuses to disappear." Sarah pulled her daughter close, both of them watching the baby who represented not just new life, but new possibilities. "Your grandmother always told me that diamonds are formed under pressure," Sarah said. "I used to think that meant enduring whatever life threw at you. Now I understand it means transforming pressure into something beautiful and unbreakable." Outside their new house, smaller than the mansion Richard had stolen, but truly theirs, Seattle's rain drummed against the windows. But inside, Sarah felt nothing but warmth and certainty about the future she was building for her children. The woman who had been discarded like worthless dead weight had become someone even she hadn't imagined possible. And this was only the beginning. The bankruptcy auction for Wellington Holdings was held on a gray Seattle morning that perfectly matched Richard's complexion as he sat in the back row of the courthouse. Sarah watched him from across the room, noting how much he'd aged in the 18 months since David's birth. Prison time, legal fees, and the complete destruction of his reputation had left him looking like a shell of the arrogant man who had once dismissed her as disposable. "Lot number 47, the auctioneer announced. "Wellington Holdings, LLC, including all assets, client contracts, and intellectual property. Opening bid is $500,000. Sarah raised her paddle calmly. $500,000. A murmur went through the room as people recognized her. The story of the pregnant wife who had built an empire while her husband went to prison had made national news, and Sarah's presence at his company's auction was being live-streamed by several business journalists. $600,000, called a voice from the middle of the room, one of Richard's former competitors. $1 million, Sarah responded without hesitation. The bidding continued for 20 minutes, but Sarah had come prepared. Phoenix Rising's success had given her access to credit lines Richard could never have imagined, and she was determined to own every piece of the company that had once excluded her from decision-making. $2.5 million, Sarah called out, finally silencing the other bidders. Sold to Phoenix Rising Legal Marketing, the auctioneer declared. Sarah owned it all now. The office building where Richard had planned her destruction, the client relationships he'd valued more than his family, the business reputation he'd sacrificed for Amanda's lies. But more than that, she owned the satisfaction of having built something bigger and better from the rubble of his betrayal. After the auction, Richard approached her in the courthouse lobby. He looked smaller somehow, diminished not just by his legal troubles, but by the realization of how completely he had underestimated the woman he'd tried to destroy. Sarah, he said quietly, I need to talk to you. Make an appointment with my assistant, Sarah replied, not slowing her pace toward the exit. Please, just 5 minutes. Something in his voice made her stop. This wasn't the arrogant businessman who had served her divorce papers while she was pregnant. This was a broken man facing the consequences of his choices. 5 minutes, she agreed. They stood in an empty courthouse hallway while Maya and the Phoenix Rising legal team waited at a respectful distance. "I know you have no reason to listen to me," Richard began, "but I want you to know that I understand now what I lost. Not just the company or the money, but you, the person you were, the person you've become. I was too arrogant to see your worth." Sarah studied the man she'd once loved desperately, looking for any trace of the person she'd married. "Richard, do you know what the worst part was? The affair. No, the fact that you made me doubt my own value. For months, I believed what you and Amanda said about me, that I was just a housewife with no real contribution, no skills worth preserving. You almost convinced me I deserved to be discarded." Richard's shoulders sagged. "I was wrong. About everything." "Yes, you were. But being wrong doesn't erase the damage you caused." "I know. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm asking for mercy. I guess I'll be getting out of prison in 8 months, and I have no job, no prospects, no way to support myself. I was wondering if—" Sarah felt a flash of the old anger, but it was quickly replaced by something more complex. Not forgiveness exactly, but a kind of detached pity for the man who had destroyed his own life, chasing someone else's con game. "If what, Richard? If you might have a position available at Phoenix Rising, entry level, minimum wage, whatever you think is appropriate. I know it's probably impossible, but I have to ask." The request was so unexpected, so completely reversed from their previous power dynamic, that Sarah almost laughed. Richard Wellington, former millionaire real estate mogul, was begging his ex-wife for a minimum wage job at the company she'd built from the ashes of their marriage. "You want to work for me?" Sarah asked. "I want to prove that I can be better than the man who hurt you." Richard replied, "And honestly, I need to support myself somehow. My legal fees consumed everything I had left." Sarah was quiet for a long moment, considering. Phoenix Rising had grown to employ over 300 people across 5 states, helping thousands of women rebuild their lives after devastating betrayals. Having Richard work for the company he'd once tried to destroy through his criminal activities would be poetic justice of the highest order. "Minimum wage," Sarah said finally. "Entry-level position in our mailroom. You'll report to Jennifer Martinez, my operations manager. She's 25 years old and has a degree from Stanford. You'll do exactly what she tells you, when she tells you, with no complaints about the reversal of your previous status." "Yes," Richard said immediately. "Thank you. I won't let you down." "Richard," Sarah's voice carried a warning, "you'll be working for a company dedicated to helping women recover from exactly the kind of betrayal you put me through. Every day, you'll be surrounded by reminders of the damage men like you cause. If you can't handle that with grace and genuine remorse, this won't work." "I understand." As Sarah walked away from the courthouse that day, she reflected on how completely her life had transformed. 18 months ago, she'd been a pregnant woman sitting in the same building, learning that her husband wanted to take her children and leave her with nothing. Today, she was a successful CEO who had just acquired her ex-husband's company and offered him employment at her discretion. The symbolism wasn't lost on anyone following the story. Business magazines wrote about Sarah's ultimate revenge arc, and women's empowerment groups used her journey as proof that even the most devastating betrayals could become the foundation for unprecedented success. But for Sarah, the real victory wasn't financial or professional, it was personal. She had reclaimed not just her economic independence, but her sense of self-worth. The woman who had once doubted her own value now employed hundreds of people and had helped thousands of others discover their own strength. That evening, Sarah sat in her home office reviewing expansion plans for Phoenix Rising, while David played on the floor beside her desk and Emma worked on college applications. The house was filled with the sounds of a family that had not just survived trauma, but had thrived beyond anything Sarah could have imagined during her darkest moments. "Mom," Emma said, looking up from her laptop, "I got my acceptance letter from Harvard Business School today." Sarah felt tears of pride spring to her eyes. "Emma, that's incredible." I want to study social entrepreneurship, Emma continued. I want to learn how to build companies that do good in the world, like what you've done with Phoenix Rising. Your father would be proud, Sarah said, then caught herself. I mean, the man your father used to be would be proud. The man he's becoming might be proud too, Emma replied thoughtfully. People can change, right? If they really want to. Sarah looked at her wise teenage daughter and wondered, not for the first time, how she'd managed to raise such an incredible human being while her own life was falling apart. Yes, Sarah agreed. People can change, but they have to prove it through actions, not just words. As the evening settled around them, Sarah allowed herself a moment of pure satisfaction. She had not just survived Richard and Amanda's betrayal, she had transformed it into something beautiful and powerful. The desperate housewife they had tried to destroy had become a force for justice and empowerment that would outlast any revenge they could have imagined. But even in her moment of triumph, Sarah knew the story wasn't over. Success brought new challenges, new responsibilities, and new opportunities to make a difference in the world. The best was yet to come. 2 years had passed since the auction, and Phoenix Rising legal marketing had become a national phenomenon. Sarah's company now operated in 12 states, employed over 800 people, and had helped more than 50,000 women navigate major life transitions. Her second TED Talk had been viewed 14 million times, and Harvard Business School was developing a case study about her transformation from betrayed wife to successful entrepreneur. Emma was thriving at Harvard, double majoring in business and psychology with plans to expand Phoenix Rising's mental health services. David was a happy, energetic 2-year-old who charmed everyone at the company daycare center Sarah had established for working parents. Even Richard had surprised everyone, including himself, by becoming a genuinely valuable employee. Working in the mailroom had evolved into a position in client services, where his business experience helped him connect with women whose husbands had financially betrayed them. His transformation from perpetrator to advocate wasn't complete, but it was real. I never thought I'd say this, Maya admitted during their weekly strategy meeting. But Richard's actually good at this job. The women trust him because he's been on the other side of what their husbands are doing. Sarah nodded, still amazed by the complete reversal of their circumstances. Accountability and genuine remorse can be powerful motivators for change. But their discussion was interrupted by Sarah's assistant, Jennifer, bursting into the conference room with a look of barely controlled panic. Sarah, you need to see this immediately, Jennifer said, holding out an overnight delivery package. It just arrived by special courier. The package was small, elegant, and bore no return address. Inside, Sarah found a single USB drive and a handwritten note on expensive stationery. Congratulations on your success. You've played the game better than I expected, but the game isn't over. Sarah's blood ran cold. Amanda Chen was supposed to be in hiding, possibly in another country, living under a false identity with the money she'd stolen from Richard's company. Maya, call Agent Walsh immediately, Sarah said, her voice steady despite the fear creeping through her system. And get our security team here now. While Maya made the calls, Sarah plugged the USB drive into her laptop with trembling fingers. The drive contained a single video file, dated 3 days ago. Amanda's face filled the screen, looking exactly as beautiful and coldly calculating as Sarah remembered. She was sitting in what appeared to be an expensive hotel room, with ocean visible through the windows behind her. Hello, Sarah. Amanda's recorded voice was conversational, almost friendly. I've been watching your success with great interest. Forbes featured you on their cover last month. From betrayed wife to business empire? Very impressive. Sarah felt sick as Amanda continued. I thought you deserved to know the truth about everything that happened. Richard wasn't my first target, and he wasn't even the most lucrative. But you were special. You see, I wasn't just working alone. I was working for someone who wanted to acquire Richard's company, and you provided the perfect opportunity to destroy it from the inside. The world seemed to tilt around Sarah as Amanda's words sank in. Marcus Chen, yes, the same last name, not a coincidence, hired me to seduce Richard, embezzle money from his company, and create enough chaos to force a bankruptcy sale. The plan was for Marcus to acquire Wellington Holdings for pennies on the dollar. Sarah's mind raced back to her first meeting with Marcus Chen, Richard's supposed business rival who had been trying to acquire the company for years. She'd thought it was just corporate competition, but if Amanda was telling the truth, the pregnancy, the social media humiliation, even the threats against your daughter, all designed to push you toward accepting a quick, unfavorable divorce settlement so Richard would lose focus on protecting his business interests. Amanda smiled directly into the camera, and Sarah saw the same cold calculation that had destroyed her marriage. But then you did something we never expected. Instead of disappearing quietly like the other wives, you fought back. You built something bigger and better than what we were trying to destroy. You actually impressed me. Sarah, the video continued with Amanda, revealing details that made Sarah's blood run cold. Marcus Chen had been planning this corporate espionage for 2 years, studying Richard's weaknesses and identifying Amanda as the perfect weapon to exploit them. The affair, the embezzlement, even the FBI investigation. Marcus had orchestrated all of it. But here's the thing. Sarah, Amanda's voice took on a harder edge. Marcus is furious that his plan failed. He wanted Wellington Holdings, not to see it transformed into your Phoenix Rising empire. And now he wants what you've built. The final part of the video showed documents, forged contracts, fabricated evidence, and legal papers that would claim Phoenix Rising had been built using technology stolen from Marcus Chen's companies. He's coming for you, Sarah, the same way he came for Richard. But this time he knows you're not naive. He's going to try to destroy Phoenix Rising and claim everything you've built. The lawsuits start next week. The video ended with Amanda leaning forward, her expression almost sympathetic. Consider this a professional courtesy. You beat me, which nobody had ever done before. I respect that, but Marcus Chen is more dangerous than Richard and I ever were, because he's patient and he's smart, and he's been planning this for much longer than you realize. Sarah sat in stunned silence as the implications crashed over her. Everything she'd thought she understood about the betrayal, about Richard's motivations, about the random nature of Amanda's targeting, it had all been carefully orchestrated by someone who was still out there, still planning. Her phone rang, jerking her back to the present. The caller ID showed Richard's number. Sarah. His voice was tight with fear. I just got a call from someone claiming to be Marcus Chen. He says he has information about Amanda that could clear me of the embezzlement charges, but he wants to meet with both of us. Together? Sarah's mind immediately went to tactical mode. Where and when? Tonight? His office downtown. Sarah, I think this might be a trap. It definitely is, Sarah agreed. The question is whether we're walking into it or setting one ourselves. She looked around the conference room at Maya, Jennifer, and the security team that had assembled during the video viewing. These people had become her chosen family, her allies in building something that mattered. Maya, get Agent Walsh on a conference call in 10 minutes, Sarah instructed. Jennifer, contact our legal team and our cybersecurity experts. If Marcus Chen thinks he can destroy what we've built the same way he destroyed Richard's company, he's about to learn that Phoenix Rising is not the same as Wellington Holdings. As her team sprang into action, Sarah felt the familiar sensation of her mind shifting into strategic mode. But this time was different. She wasn't the naive housewife who had been blindsided by betrayal. She was a CEO who had built an empire from nothing, surrounded by people who believed in her vision. Marcus Chen wanted a war. He was about to get one. But this time, Sarah Wellington would be fighting from a position of strength, experience, and hard-won wisdom. The phone rang again. Agent Walsh's number. Sarah, we've been tracking unusual financial activity around companies associated with Marcus Chen, Agent Walsh said without preamble. We think Amanda's video is legitimate. He's been planning a hostile takeover of your company for months. Then let's give him exactly what he's not expecting, Sarah replied, her voice carrying the confidence of someone who had already survived the worst betrayal imaginable and emerged stronger. What did you have in mind? Sarah looked out the window of her corner office at the Seattle skyline, the city where she'd lost everything and then built something even better. We're going to do to him exactly what he did to Richard, she said, except we're going to do it legally, ethically, and with the full support of the FBI. By the time we're finished, Marcus Chen will understand what it means to underestimate a woman who's already lost everything once. As Sarah began outlining her plan, she realized that Amanda's warning had actually been a gift. For the first time since this nightmare began, Sarah would be fighting an enemy she could see coming, and she intended to win. The story was far from over, but Sarah Wellington had become someone who didn't just survive betrayal, she transformed it into victory. Whatever Marcus Chen had planned, he was about to discover that the woman he'd tried to destroy had become more dangerous than he'd ever imagined. The phoenix had risen, and now it was time to soar.